Africa has witnessed various crimes, but the mention of some of the notorious criminals who are currently serving various prison terms can send shivers down the spine. They are described by their victims as very, very dreadful, heartless, and also daring. Of course, today I bring to you 10 most notorious African criminals who shook the foundation of the African continent. Do make sure to subscribe to our channel and also like our videos as we present to you various videos every day. We start from number 10 straight up to number 1. Number 10. Edward Shimole, aka the Jackal, a serial killer and rapist described as Kenyan's Carlos the Jackal because of his long success in eluding police, was recaptured after staging an escape from the country's maximum security prison shortly before he was to be hanged. Edward Shimole confessed to 14 murders, 88 rapes, plus a string of bank robberies and drug deals in a decade-long crime spree. Shimole was also a serial jailbreaker, escaping from prison 4 times. On one occasion, as the hangman beckoned, he told police he escaped by bribing or tricking warders. Kenyan police nicknamed Shimole Carlos the Jackal after the Venezuelan terrorist who operated in Europe and the Middle East during the 70s and 80s, evading capture for nearly 20 years. His bank robberies netted him millions of pounds, but to the last he really discarded his stolen getaway cars. Shimole told his interrogators that he narrowly escaped death in 1996 when policemen chasing his gang shot dead an accomplice. During one escape from Kampiti, he almost chopped off the leg of a prison warder. He also confessed to dozens of rapes, mostly of motorists he carjacked in Nairobi, after he was sentenced to death in 1996 for several murders. Gerald Wambungu, aka Wanungu. Gerald Wambungu alias Wanungu was a ruthless armed gangster who terrorized the country in the 90s. Wanungu started his life crime in the late 80s and by the 90s was seen as a ruthless gangster who cared for nothing but himself. He was feared not just by ordinary Kenyans but also by the police themselves, as he was involved in several bank heists in the country. His reign of terror ended in 1996 in Nakuru when he was gunned down by flying squad officers alongside his girlfriend, whom he used as a human shield. Wanungu was one of Kenya's most profiled robbers and topped the list of the most elusive gangsters who gave the flying squad sleepless nights in the 80s. He was feared both for his ready-to-kill stance and guts to rob banks in broad daylight. He was, however, felled under the hail of bullets in 1996. Peter Wakionga. Terrorizing the sprawling streets of Nairobi, Peter Wakionga, alias Wakionga, was a famous bank robber and a cold-blooded killer. His surname Wakionga is Swahili for strangling. He is the godfather in the history of Kenyan crime due to the laws of gangster that he influenced. He was every policeman's nightmare in Nairobi, operating covertly from the Kanibi. Wakiongi was feared even by then presidents at that time. In the 1970s, Wakiongi was the most wanted man in Kenya with a bounty of 100,000 Kenyan shillings on his head. In his lifetime, he robbed millions of shillings from various banks countrywide. He was killed in 1978 after a dramatic gunshot with the police in a club in Nairobi. Cedric Mike, aka Wema Pan Killer. Cedric Mike, aka Wema Pan Killer, born in 1965, stood out from most other killers as he had no weapons or victim preferences. He is popularly known as Wema Pan Killer as it was part of Johannesburg, in which he attacked most of his victims between 1996 and 1997. Cedric began his cruel acts by robbing taxi drivers and shop owners, where after he would ruthlessly beat them to death. He then started attacking couples where he would murder the men as the women washed. He would then rape the women and kill them after he was done. Initially, the police thought that 2 separate people were making the killings. After thorough investigation, they realized that it was one killer all through. During his trial, he pleaded not guilty. Luckily, surviving female victims emerged and testified against him. Cedric's behavior in court was outrageous as he would scream and cry in a manner that caused distress. He even threatened the female state prosecutor, claiming that he would rape and kill her, just as he did to other victims. On September 6, 2000, he was convicted of 12 rapes, 26 attempted murders, 27 murders, 41 robberies, and the unlawful possession of ammunition and firearms. He was declared guilty of 114 of 134 charges in all and was sentenced to 27 life sentences, plus 1,159 years and 3 months imprisonment. In total, his sentence amounted to 1,340 years in prison. Johnson Combian. Johnson is a notorious criminal who broke jail twice under mysterious circumstances after being jailed for his involvement in robbery activities both in Ghana and neighboring Togo using sophisticated weapons. He was after this reported to have killed 2 policemen in Nankpanduri in the northern region. Notorious armed robber Johnson, who slaughtered 2 cops in the northern region of Ghana, was arrested and sentenced to death by hanging by the Accra Fast Track High Court in August 2008. Johnson and his accomplice, who are currently on the run, were alleged to have ambushed 3 policemen on October 17, 2010 and succeeded in killing 2 of them. He was arrested, tried and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment by the Tamale Circuit Court, but he escaped while serving his jail term. He later sought refuge in Nankpanduri in the northern region, which happened to be his hometown. On October 17, 2010, together with his accomplice, Johnson received information that a number of policemen had been detailed to perform duties at Nankpanduri. He and his accomplice, however, ambushed and attacked the 3 policemen. Johnson fled to neighboring Togo, but through the intervention of international police Interpol, he was arrested on Friday, November 19, 2010, when he crossed the border to visit his girlfriend. Even in prison, he tried to break jail at the Nsawam medium security prison, as he was reported on October 17, 2010, moved from his condemned cell to the main prison yard. Abiodun Ngojobi aka Godogodo. Abiodun Ngojobi alias Godogodo had only one eye, but he was about the deadliest armed robber Nigeria ever had. When Lawrence Anini, the Edo State-born kingpin and arguably Nigeria's most talked-about bandit of the 80s, was at his peak of his reign, little did he know that several years after, a successor would take up the mantle and dwarf anything he ever did. Up came 36-year-old Abiodun Ngojobi alias Godogodo, who rose from being a slum boy to the leader of a gang that defied all reasons, killed without mercy, and terrorized Lagos and the southwest with reckless abandon. Originally from Ugo State, Ngojobi was on the wanted list of police for over 10 years. And the way he managed to evade the police is still legendary. At that time, any robbery in Lagos had the imprint of Godogodo, with him leading or one of his boys being responsible. He was famed for leading many robbery operations, especially on banks, with the infamous reputation of killing over 100 policemen in Lagos State. Godogodo allegedly went for operation with a bag containing 100 fully loaded AK-47 with 30 rounds of ammunition each, and as such he was fully prepared in terms of weapons on his back. Godogodo began his voyage into the deadly world of crime after spending 7 years in prison for what he considered a minor offense. As a scrap dealer, he was involved in a fight and the police arrested him. With no one to bail him out, Godogodo was sent to jail, and in his mind he believed his going to prison was an injustice and blamed the police for it. While in prison, he became acquainted with many deadly armed robbers and formed an alliance with them, took time to understudy them. When he finally left prison, he decided that he was going to deal with the police for sending him to prison for 7 years. The investigation led to the police to Dubai, where he went often to buy goods for his boutique or in a bid to get their man. The operation took about 7 months before the police finally got hold of him one early morning. Moses Sithole, aka ABC Killer. Moses Sithole is a South African serial killer who committed the ABC murders, so named because they began in Aldersville, continued in Boksburg, and finally in Cleveland, a suburb of Johannesburg. He began raping women in his early 20s, claiming 3 victims before one finally testified against him. He was sent to prison, during which he himself was sexually assaulted by other prisoners. His murder spree began in 1994. Shortly after his release, Sitoli would gain access to victims by pretending to be a businessman and offering them work, going so far as to invent a fictional charity organization. Once he had gained their trust, he would offer to walk them through a field to the business headquarters until they were out of sight and hearing range. He would then overpower, rape, and strangle them. By 1995, he had claimed over 30 victims, igniting a nationwide panic. In some cases, he would call the victim family and chant them. Shortly after that, Sitole contacted his brother-in-law, who promised him to help him get a gun and arrange the meeting. The brother-in-law notified the police, but Sitole sensed a trap at the meeting spot and ran. Police shot him twice when he charged them with an axe, wounding him before taking him into custody. He eventually confessed to the murders on December 5, 1997. Sitole was sentenced to 50 years imprisonment of each of the 38 murders, 12 years imprisonment for each of the 40 rapes, and 5 years imprisonment for each of the 6 robberies. Since his sentence ran consecutively, the total effective sentence is one of 2,410 years. Justice David ordered that Sitole would be required to serve at least 930 years before being eligible for parole. During this time, press reports that he was HIV positive, but he still received treatment for the virus while in prison, but his wife and child died of the disease because law-abiding citizens do not automatically qualify for any sort of healthcare coverage until age 65. Dr. Ishola Oyenisi. Ishola Oyenisi, popularly known as Dr. Ishola, was a notorious Nigerian armed robber who committed a series of robbery and other crimes in the late 60s and early 70s. The phenomenal armed robber rose from the ashes of the Nigerian Civil War that spanned 3 years, from 1967 to 1970. During his reign of terror, Dr. Oyenusi kept a name for himself as the most brutal terror the country had ever known. He lived up to another of his nickname of Dr. Rob and Kill. Because he was known to kill with impunity and his myth was legendary, he unleashed boundless terror on many Nigerians and would even kill for a stick of cigarette. Oyenisi was no doubt the uncrowned emperor of Nigerian robbers, and he was described as the first celebrated armed robber in Nigeria. In March 1971, Oyenisi, together with 6 other members of his gang, were nabbed by the Nigerian police after he organized a robbery in which $28,000 was stolen. They killed a policeman in the process. The first public execution of robbers had taken place in April 1971. That of Oyenisi and his criminals was a special case, and the Lagos government took time to prepare the grounds at the bar beach. On the day of Oyenisi's execution, 8 September 1971, over 30,000 Nigerians trooped at the famous bar beach, while some of the crowd geared and booed Oyenisi and his gang of 7. Some of his friends and family members present could not hold back their tears. But for most of the witnesses, it was good radiance to bad nonsense. As for Oyenisi, he was smiling to the last, but the agony of his face too was unmistakable. As the soldiers grabbed and tied him to a pole, a soldier let out a fierce command to the sharpshooters. Like an electrified being, his body shook vigorously as he slumped and went limp around the pole that held his remains. Atai. Ghana's highest 7 convict and notorious criminal Raymond Ayi Ayite, popularly known as Atai, born in Adabraka, was described by Ghana's police as the nation's most wanted criminal because he and his gang curiously killed their victims before robbing them. In the early stages of his life, Ayi was a taxi driver. In 2005, Ata Ayi was sentenced to 160 years in prison with hard labor on the charges of robbery and conspiracy to rob. According to Ghana's most famous criminal mind, his arrest on the 28th of February 2005 was a tip-off by his niece for a different crime he had committed. It was believed that Atai uses amulets and talisman when going on a robbery mission, which allows him to disappear and also give him protection not to be caught or shot. According to the criminal, he used the money he made from robbery to help people, and also he replied that he acted as Robin Hood by doling out the money to needy people in the society. He was one of the most dreadful and notorious criminals Ghana has ever recorded. Lawrence Anini, aka The Law. Lawrence Anini, Nigeria's most notorious armed robber, was born sometime in 1960. He terrorized the old Bendel state, especially its capital Benin City, in the 1980s. By 1986, his robbery exploit has reached such a terrible level that it became a national issue. Anini, dreadfully called The Law, migrated to Benin at the age, learned to drive, and became a skilled taxi driver within a few years. He later took to criminal acts in the city and as soon became a driver and transporter for gangs, criminal godfathers, and thieves. Soon after, he decided to create his own gang. They started out as carjackers, bus robbers, and bank thieves. In an operation in August of 1986, the Anini team struck at First Bank, where they carted away 2,000 naira, but although the amount stolen was seen as chicken feed, they left the scene with trail of blood. Many persons were killed. Anini spearheaded a 4-month reign of terror between August and December 1986. He also reportedly wrote numerous letters to media houses using political tones of Robin Hood to describe his criminal acts. It was soon discovered that Anini gang had insidered within the police hierarchy. John Iyimu, a deputy superintendent of police, was their arrowhead. Finally, it took the courage of Superintendent of Police Kayode to bring the Anini reign of terror to an end. On December 3, 1986, Anini was shot in the leg, transferred to a military hospital, and had one of his legs amputated. When Anini's hideout was searched, police recovered assorted charms, including the one he usually wore around his waist during operations. Due to the amputation of his leg, Anini was confined to a wheelchair throughout his trial. Anini and some of his accomplices were executed on March 29, 1980. These are some of the notorious criminals who massacred lots of citizens of various countries. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and also comment to our videos for more updates on your social lifestyle and entertainment stories. My name is Aiden Savara. Till then, it's a bye.